how could you have best bits when it's all just superb, you know?
Yes, yes.
No, the only thing I would do is introduce you later and
Sure,
give all your links and stuff. But you
sure.
know, people can find you, join your cosmic bus. They'll all
Mm-hmm.
want to
Mm-hmm.
do that. So I'm recording now. Are you okay with this?
Let's go with it.
So we'll go with it and hopefully something will have recorded. So before I pressed record, we're talking about the state of the world and supermarkets and branding and packaging and plastics. So you were saying, what is it, decentralized?
Yeah, I think we were just talking about how to sort of reduce the waste. Um, but I mean, we're talking about the future here, right? The future is quite an amazing place. It's just an issue of how we're going to get there, right? Because there's a few transitional teething issues that we're going to have along the way. Mainly because we're kind of still clutching to you know, our old school ways. We like to have our car. We like to drive in the car by ourselves, go miles and miles and miles by ourselves. We don't like to share space. I mean, those things are very, they're going to be considered a luxury. They're even driving our own car, like being at the helm of the machine, is going to be considered by our children like, you guys really did that? Yeah, like the
Mine won't
Wild
learn how
Wild
to
West.
drive.
The
I think they
danger
just
in it.
know.
Um, yeah, there's a lot of things that our attachments are the worst part of the transition. And when they say this WEF kind of slogan that you're you'll own nothing and be happy, they really know what they're talking about. It's it's the sense of thinking that you're not owning anything that really scares the shit out of people. Because ownership really is a lot to do with how you feel about yourself, owning things and owning your things, having your own things, your nice bracelets and your kind of fancy sunglasses, your big house, and the property over on the beach. Those are really kind of. But what if the whole world, if you can imagine, was more Uber, Uber Eats, Airbnb-ish, and nothing really belonged to anyone. It was interchangeable. I'm in an Airbnb right now.
Mm.
It took me 5 minutes to get. I came in, it was furnished, it was heated, it had all the trimmings, and all the power was connected, the Wi-Fi, the whole thing. All I needed was the password. It was a delight. And then when I leave, I just got to pack my little bag, my few belongings, and go off to the next place. And all I need is a password there as well. It's basically exchange my little swipe code, even
Do you think,
biometric.
that we've been entrained into believing now the security we need it for security, and what about the pension and what we're going to do when we retire and all of that? But if we're, I have no intention to retire. I don't know about you. I think that's a mentality that we can move easier into that idea if we know, well, we'll always have some kind of flow coming in, and whereas people working 9 to 5 will be let go, and then they feel that
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
owning
We,
their
you know,
house.
we're still hanging on to this thing that it's my house, it's my car, it's my job.
Yeah.
There's not going to be any of that. And the reason I say that is because it can't. It'll get to the point where resources have to be exactly measured to be able to cycle and recycle constantly. That you won't be able to store and save resources. And the earth will only produce as much as humans are needing as they go. Right. We're in this difficult transitional space, though, because we still want to own things. We're still clutching to owning things. And when we own things, we can put them away and we can sell them, and we can turn them into cash, which we can hoard. We can hoard tons of cash. Look at some of the there's these reptiles that are kind of greedy as all hell. They're amassing enough wealth to feed 1,000,000 lifetimes or 1,000,000 families of theirs, right? Is it necessary? Does Bill Gates, sorry to use the eponymous swear word, does he need to own that much farmland? What is he doing? Does he really need to have so much influence in everyone's little operation? Does he need to infiltrate my computing system to mine it for data and, just check the last website? Does he really need to do that? What for? We just need to loosen up a little, okay? The letting go process is all part of the becoming healthier human beings, creating healthier communities, healthier societies, healthier planets. Now, I'm pontificating, aren't I?
Yeah. No, I think part of the knee-jerk reaction. I mean, I went to bed just in the middle and I woke up as an alt far right person in the last 3 years. And it's like, what the hell?
Because you had a theory.
But because I've been doing healing work for so long and I've been working with non-attachment, I get it. I understand. And when you die, you don't take it with you. We're not like being buried in the tomb with all of our pets and the people who used to work for us and the gold and all of that to knock on God's gate. And I think it's really empowering to know that whatever you are wearing in the fabric of your soul, which is directly connected to how you are in your life and, the good nature and being of service, that's what counts more than how many sheep you have in your field. But we are in such a difficult time. I think that's why astrologers are so helpful for those of us who can't see what's coming, or we're driving that car on our own, which I love to do, with the fog in front and you just don't know where the hell you're going. And then you've got somebody saying, well, there's going to be a red traffic light. You'll have a break. You can just stop and you can sit and you can relax. And then the fog might clear a little bit here, but then be prepared because it's going to come in worse over here. And you go, okay, somebody can see this. This is a relief, And maybe we need to get out of the car and walk. Maybe we need to sit inside each other's cars. I don't know, but we're definitely in a time of massive change. And I think, we all need to talk like this. Definitely. I mean, you're the first person, and you're the first person who's suggesting that owning nothing and being happy might actually be a good thing.
No, it's only because I've put it on test. Now, since 2012, when I quit the corporation, I checked in, I sold my house, I dispersed all my belongings. Not immediately, gradually. It took me a few years, and I still just got rid of the washing machine that was sitting at my parents' place, which I gave to the ex-wife, as I have really basically everything, because that's where the kids are. But, I gave up all that, the house, the wife, the whole happy marriage in suburbia trip. And immediately my stress levels went down. It took a lot to come to that decision. In fact, for years I labored with it and I suffered. To the point where I guess I had a nervous breakdown, Abby. Yeah. I guess my nervous system wasn't coping with the degree of anguish and responsibility that I thought I had to a community which was really feeding off me. Yeah. I was in a powerful position. I had hundreds of people working for me. I had lots and lots of things to take care of. I had customers and clients and logistics going backwards and forwards. And my mind, just bear in mind that I was already an astrologer a decade or two earlier and had gone on a spiritual quest before I started that position. But my mind was starting to disconnect from my heart. And when your heart stops talking, or you repress what the heart wants to say enough, well, then you really kind of you're really cooking it from both sides. And it's quite likely that had I remained in that position, which was very rewarding financially, very rewarding socially, probably likely I'd be dead by now.
It
I'd be
wasn't
long
doing
dead.
astrology. It wasn't what the position you're talking about was in a corporate.
Yeah, I was a logistics manager of a very large beverage firm.
Right.
Yeah, which was getting larger because, by 2010, a lot of these Australian companies, and it was actually an English company, Schweppes, Cadbury owned Schweppes, and then Cadbury sold Schweppes off to Asahi. And then the Japanese came along and just couldn't really quite understand the margin of error, in our culture. They couldn't understand why we couldn't get 98.8% efficiency. Why was it 84.6%? And, that took, as a manager, it took quite a lot of, this was a lot of work to try to, shock the culture, the Australian culture, that we had to not be so sloppy.
So human.
Yeah, that's right. The humans. And yeah, I did all my best to kind of introduce as much automation and robotics, but I think it got to that point where, effectively what I had to do was engineer not just myself, but the entire workforce out of the equation. And I was happy to do that because I'm not someone who's going to sit around and watch robots play. But I did feel for a lot of the employees that really kind of were used to the routine of showing up to work every day. But I also realized that was not really an environment for human souls to be kind of languishing. It does create enormous inequities and unhealthy kind of conditions, and watching people do the same thing over and over, not for a few days or a few weeks or a few seasons, but basically a lifetime. Watching these young men become old on the same machine, going backwards and forwards, working all that overtime, all those weekends, and basically ignoring any connection to their family and saying to themselves that I'm a great family man because I'm providing a little extra for who knows what, maybe some new carpet or whatever. It just didn't make sense. And really, as I said, I'd already had my spiritual trip before that. When I came into that environment, I realized that, the first thing I wanted to do was engineer, as much ease as possible. And you find that really when you want to make improvements that affect other people's lives, there's so much resistance to that. People don't like change. They like it the old-fashioned way. And if it's harder work, if it makes them more tired, or it possibly increases the chance of an accident or an injury, they'll fight to keep it that way. And they'll band together. That, as we do as human beings. We don't like change. We certainly don't like anyone coming above us and saying this is the way it's got to be. Yeah. Of course, that person above you knows a little more about the way the world works because they understand also that they need to remain competitive. Competition is what drives progress. Around 2000, from about 2000 to 2010, the Asia market, particularly in Australia, the Asia Pacific region, was starting to get very, very ludicrously lucrative.
Lucrative, yeah.
And so, we're competing with the likes of China and all those southern Asian countries to produce a product that was, cutthroat. And Australians have got a European and very Anglo kind of lifestyle. We like to work a few hours. We like to take lots of breaks. We like our sickies and we like our public holidays. We certainly like to get plastered at the end of the shift down at the pub, and maybe not show up 100% the next day,
Mm.
and coast our way through things, have a chat here and play a game there. The Asian mentality, particularly the last 20, 30 years, has been very much performing like a machine. And it's only gotten more mechanical over there, wherever that is, particularly China. Robotics, automatic technologies, and artificial intelligence is booming, and it's become, they're a socialist world, so they don't really have much of a gripe about being part of a community.
Yeah.
They don't have a religion. It's largely Confucianists, which basically Confucius's main philosophy was, you're nothing if you're not serving the bigger thing, which really, I suppose, is something that we need to start integrating into our ethos. Because in our ethos, it's all about me. It's all about me, how much I can get, how far I can get ahead, which we got to celebrate, because if you don't have that, then you don't have creativity and have enterprise, right? That's something the Chinese do not have. They're very good at copying stuff, making it smaller, making it faster, but they're not good at blue sky thinking. They don't have that luxury to be able to sit around and just loaf. Yeah, they feel awful about that.
Yeah.
But once we start competing with that, and the competition starts to seep over the fence into your yard, and then you start thinking, oh my God, if I don't remain competitive, I'm going to get swallowed up. Yeah, which is largely what's happening in Australia in the last decade or so, and before that, right? But now it's really kind of hit home. Yeah, if you're not moving sort of in the Chinese way, you're kind of going to be swallowed up by Chinese, enterprises. Same sort of thing going on in America, and you can see the tensions now, right? Just out of the blue, particularly the last 6 to 12 months. What's happening? Yeah, all these issues around, Chinese spy balloons, TikTok spying on us.
Well, they're taking away the human element from a lot of these things. I mean, when you're going back to talking about working in a factory, I mean, my granddad had a factory too, and you get on the process line, you get the robotic arms doing that work, but you'd never be without the people for the customer to customer relations. Except now we have this new AI that seems to be able to do that pretty well. We can get rid of a whole nother layer of the workforce. So what are we supposed to do? It's kind of like a break of our identity, what we're going through. Who are we? What are we supposed to be doing here?
Well, yeah, I think that's the thing. We're identifying very much by what we do, the kind of community we belong to, and all of those things are exterior sort of attachments that we have. Our own identity. We're not identifying by something that's much more internal. We're not in touch with anything to do with the inner voice. Some of us are, and some of us talk about that they are, but they're actually really, they're just going through the motions or talking schmaltzy kind of quasi-spiritual talk. I mean, if everything that you are is kind of getting a reference point from your environment, your relationship to your family, the people that love you, your fans and followers on Instagram, or, the amount of money you have in the bank, or the amount of, influence you have down at the cracker factory. Well, you're kind of going to have a situation where, like myself, you wake up one day and think, this is bullshit. I feel really like I've got everything. Supposedly on paper, I looked great. Where 12 years earlier as an astrologer, and I was making great money. I wasn't, back then I was a financial astrologer. I was making great money. I went down to the bank for a bank loan to buy a house, and they said, well, what do? You're an astrologer. And I said, look, your credit rating is like, that's down here with the illegal immigrants and the unemployed, the long-term unemployed. That's how I was treated down at the official, credit line.
Is that
Like
why
I
you
was,
went and got the job?
pardon?
That's why you got your job.
That's why I kind of, yeah, I really, I was really sad. I went into depression and I went away, and then I came back to the city and I thought, I'm just going to get, just going to get a normal job. I
Yeah.
wanted a wife, I wanted children, basically, I wanted children, I wanted a family. So I ended up getting a job as a forklift driver and sort of progressed through the ranks, in a matter of years. I never told them I was an astrologer. I never quite knew how that forklift driver always knew when the best time was not to launch and to launch a particular project. And they didn't listen to me at the start. They didn't. They thought I was crazy. But then they started saying, once you start to kind of come through with the inner dope, they're willing to listen. They don't really want to know how you do it, but they kind of want you on side. And so progressively, and I wasn't no dummy. I really kind of, was my education was deceptive. I had to dumb it down to even get that job, but it paid well. And before long, I had my house, I had my bank loan, I had my children, and all the promotions and trimmings that come with, success in the big cracker factory. But as I said, it kind of becomes a little bit of a go for wheel, and you start to realize you're quite trapped in this, because you don't really, if you're working for somebody else, you don't get, creative agency. You don't get the capacity to make decisions that are wholly your own. And what's even worse is that when you kind of do have some brilliant ideas that, people don't get behind them, and you kind of realize that you missed great opportunities. They've missed great opportunities, but you miss great opportunities, and life starts to fleet away, and you start to think, well, I'm really not happy, and then you wake up one day and you just can't bear to go back to that. I mean, if you can come to that point where you can say, look, okay, that's it. This is making me really, really sick, emotionally at least, before it breaks into some sort of pack of hives. If you have the courage to act on, what your intuition or the pain that you're feeling, let's put it that way, yeah. If you have the courage to act on pain, then you've got the capacity to heal. And what is healing? Healing is just basically realizing that you're doing the same thing and getting the same result, and you're not really happy with that. And realizing that you have the power to change the narrative, change the story.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of healers have stories like that, where they're in a different job, get disconnected. A lot of people, particularly in corporate, project managers. I was in corporate myself. I also have a master's in science and worked as a research biologist for a while, and it didn't light me up. But I suppose in a way you take that training and you bring it into whatever you're doing. But where we're going now is really interesting, because we just can't see it. We don't know. But what I do know, though, is that, like what you were saying earlier, if you're defining yourself by what's around you and what's outside of you, then you're disempowered right from the beginning. So at least taking the time to unhook yourself from those things and bring yourself back in, I think, is a worthwhile.
All that's well and good, right? The external references and the measuring scales that are out there are really good, but what should happen when they're removed, which is what's happening, what's been happening now gradually and slowly, faster and faster, it's starting to dismantle. Yeah. So, when particularly through COVID, a lot of the conventional routes, you couldn't go down that road, you couldn't go to that store, you couldn't go and see Mike, you couldn't go see Mum even, when all those things, and that's what happened. It was almost a miracle from above, right? Suddenly we were forced into detachment, Yeah. We were forced to let go. And it was supposedly temporary. Remember, it started off with 2 weeks to flatten the curve, then sort of like actually it might actually be like 2 months. And then 2 months became 2 years. And we're still kind of thinking that we're going to return to some sense of normality, right? And then, of course, it was the new normal, which was what? What normal? What is the new normal? You know, when you detach from something, it's very difficult to get warmed up back into it again. I don't know if you've been in any of those relationships which are kind of, they start off really exciting and fast, but they also, just for some unknown reason, one day they break off, and then they're back on, 3 weeks later. And sure, it's kind of like you had some good times, you can pick up again, it's great, but your heart's not really going to settle with it as much as it would have been had you not had the break, right? We like to feel, particularly with heart-to-heart connections, is that there's going to be that continuity, and there's not going to be that chance of sudden abandonment or, cold shoulder or disappearance or flying in, fly out at the whim. There's many people that have relationships with their parents like that.
Yeah.
Which develop into all kinds of, attachment issues. But that's another story. What I'm talking about here is this: when the whole world suddenly has to detach from a particular way of life. And it's happened before in history. We're not the first people to suddenly experience a cataclysmic, breaking away from an old way of life. Our forebears used to go through wars, famines, pandemics, illness outbreaks, believe it or not, were far more common than, what our living memory tells us. But wars as well. Suddenly, all the boys have gone. They've gone off to another land, and half of them come back, and half of them have half their limbs attached, and we're not going to be the same. That was very common. And the other thing was, of course, you never knew which barbarians were going to jump the fence and raid your precious lifestyle. Never knew what was going to happen. But when they did happen, they happened widespread, and everybody suffered, either directly or indirectly. We're really the first generation that have been cotton-wooled from the 60s on, yeah?
We all just got too comfortable, and the expectation that the supermarket would be there, we could buy whatever we wanted, and that we would get a job, and then suddenly it's all taken away. Which I suppose is really good in a way.
Oh, the supermarket was still there. Sorry, Abby. The supermarket was the only thing.
Essential items only. No toilet roll, no tomatoes.
I think throughout the pandemic, I could still get all my stuff. That was the miraculous thing.
Yeah.
It felt almost as if everything but the central supply unit and your home were the only things that hadn't changed. Your home was still as comfortable as it was before the pandemic, perhaps even more comfortable. You might have got a bigger TV, or a bigger fridge, or a pool table, or something like that to entertain you.
You just realize how uncomfortable it was, and you were in denial the whole time that it wasn't comfortable. And then you had to be faced with that and deal with that and sort that out, which I think is also really good, because escaping into work was what a lot of people were doing, not talking to their partners, and now they're trapped in the house with the partner and realizing this is not the person that I married. This is not what I want with my life. So yeah.
So it did make it easier even to detach from those things that were inside us. Yeah. It made it easy for us to say to people that were bothering us but were in our lives, no, too close. Please Just
I'm
keep
not feeling well. I don't want to
on.
meet you today.
Right, yeah. It made it acceptable to
Yeah,
say,
I'm
no,
thinking of
back
you,
off.
Ang. It's because of you. You know, my little sniffle might make you sick. I'm going to stay home.
Yeah, yeah. So there, it became the new normal was to be able to say no, thank you, and to, reset the great reset of boundaries,
Mm.
whether they're internal or external, and a little bit of both. It was, I mean, we're talking astrologically, we're talking about this period of Saturn going into Aquarius, right? Which happened sort of, it kind of, Saturn has this way of moving backwards and forwards, like most planets in relation to the sun. They go, into direct or retrograde motion. So Saturn went into Aquarius. Aquarius, of course, is an air sign. It's an intellectual sign. We talk about the age of Aquarius as beginning through the recession of the equinoxes of somewhere around the middle of the century, of the last century. And it does take a couple of hundred years because the age itself lasts 2,000 years. But it's the age of innovation, yeah, because Aquarius is an intellectual sign.
Mm.
And it's the age of uh, being intellectual is not it's not like Pisces, the 2,000 years of Pisces, marked by the dawn of Christ.
So we've
And
moved out of that and we're moving into Aquarius now. Is that what?
we're in the transition, yeah. So we're letting go of Pisces, of course, is a water sign. It's emotional. It's to do with illness, depression, but it's also to do with suffering and art. It's to do with psychic and mediumship into a greater universe, alternative worlds, etc. But it's also got to do with deception, all kinds of I mean, religion in general. It's a classic thing, isn't it?
Or is
When
it wanting somebody else to lead you through something? Is that what you mean?
wanting to feel like you're part of something bigger, yeah,
Mm.
and and wanting to feel like you're part of something bigger means letting go of your personal boundaries. And so what you saw in the last 2,000 years was this massive humanity in, basically immersed in each other's, pain and suffering, and creating that kind of uh, ill distinction between where you begin and where you end. And this kind of creates this, okay, it does kind of call for some system of compassion and kindness, but then it also that's also mixed in with cultural interests in terms of like, well, I'm going to suffer, but only for my people. I'm going to sacrifice myself, but only for my people. But those people over there, they're going to suffer on account of me because they're not really as valuable. They're not really as.
That's really interesting now because there's been a shift because I've been doing healing work now for 15 years anyway with clients and noticing how only relatively recently more and more people who are empathic or sensitive to energies are more willing now to say, my mother's pain is not my pain. My sister's pain is not my pain. I actually don't have to carry that now. Whereas that's something that intrinsically I knew. These, more and more people are realizing I'm off the hook. I don't have to do this. But it's like we've been doing this all this time and now we don't. And
Well,
it's very
you didn't
freeing.
have a choice, and it was part of the ethos. It was part of like most religions, kind of, and religion really has ruled the last 2,000 years. You might say it was kind of there was some science, but the science really only started to emerge. Well, it's arguable, really, but the industrial age did sort of bring some sort of encouragement, let's say, to get things right, to have some sort of a precise mechanism or a precise formula in terms of sorting things out. Prior to that, it was all superstition, and you had to pray for things, to happen. Yeah, if you got a disease, you had to pray. You might have tried lots of things like basically lopping someone's head off if they've got a headache. You know,
Put a
one way
nuke
to
in their
sort the
brain,
problem out.
yeah.
But it's largely superstitious. And I think, look, nothing against religion, because I've been mentioning very recently in my writings is, we need some system of faith. Yeah. But I think what's emerging and really the click from Pisces to Aquarius began in the mid-60s, when people were starting to say, no, F you, right? I'm not going to your war. I'm not doing this for you. I'm not doing this for... So there was kind of that first instance. You never, ever saw any, antistasis towards the patriarch prior to
Yeah.
that. People were raised to respect the patriarch, respect their elders, respect the father. Doesn't matter how deranged and just illogical the whole thing seemed. You just had to. It was just not a done thing. You went to prison if you didn't. But that was the first sign, and then, then you started to see the celebration of the individual coming through. And of course, it helped that we had some of those psychedelics and doorways into seeing alternative dimensions. But it also was the first sign that we were detaching from the world of suffering and perpetuating pain and creating a whole ethos around it. So it is happening in increments, but here we are, really, we're at the most critical point. Saturn has come out of Aquarius, just gone into Pisces. So we're starting to see how we're starting to crystallize our ideas around understanding more about this pain and suffering nonsense. And as Pluto, the great bone crusher, this distant planet out there in the Kuiper Belt, comes into Aquarius, we start to reimagine and reformulate our understanding of what it means to be humanity and go for humanitarian things. And I'm not going to talk about democracy, because every possible interpretation of democracy that we've seen in action hasn't really quite been democratic. And I'm not even sure that,
That it exists in real life.
True essence of,
Yeah.
the true essence of democracy is actually a functional thing, because who wants to be pushed around by 51% of the population? Yeah.
Yeah.
We're seeing, particularly the last sort of 20, 30 years, you're seeing elections falling closer and closer to the line, where it's only like a half a dozen people in the middle have made the call. And
Or
there's
have
so
they,
easily...
or is it genuine, or, what's the truth and what's working and what's not working. But what I see as you're talking, those business toys on the desk with the pendulum going back and forth and back and forth.
Yeah.
And it just feels that we've moved way too far over, and we just have to give it the time to come into balance, where we can let go of the emotional angst that comes through with the revealing of what's actually been going on all these years, that we've just been totally blind to it. And now we can see it, and we're having our grieving. And I'm not being facetious here, but we need that time to allow the emotions to come out, so that we can be rational then when we start to say, okay, let's create from the energy that we want to see in the world, instead of creating out of anger or chaos. And in Ireland anyway, I'm seeing a lot of anger. So let's spend time healing the anger, so we can start to shift and create from a higher level. That's what I'd like to see anyway.
Yeah, it's not just Ireland, I'm afraid. I've been traveling all around the world, particularly since January of last year.
Yeah.
Been to all the continents.
So you find it very similar between them all?
Well, yeah, there's a common thread. People are just generally, they're a little bit resentful. And that's not coming from anything that just happened earlier this morning with their spouse, or someone cut them off on the road. There's that resentment that's building. It's a stress, really, which is a residual layering of just years and years, and perhaps even decades or lifetimes a lot of the stress we're discovering now is transgenerational. We're seeing actually, well, it's not just me that's being screwed. It wasn't just my father and, you know, perhaps even his father. You know, it's like the whole, you know, the whole community, the whole society, the whole planet's been screwed for a very long time. And you know, I mean, that's sort of, it's a little bit irrational, right? That resentment, because yeah, of course, you know, we've all suffered. We're relatively much better off today than we were even 3 years ago. You know, if you're
I was
looking.
talking to my dad on the weekend, and you know, when I'm looking at how much money we have left, myself and my husband have left to pay on our mortgage, it's practically the same amount of money that the house actually cost us when we bought it. But then when my father's talking about business loans that he took out because he's an entrepreneur, and the rate of interest that he was paying back in 1980, and he's saying, you know, 20% compared to 3%, and people are really upset now, and it was nothing compared to then.
Yeah, no, we have got it extremely easy. Look at our kids. Our kids will never really know what hard work is. You know, they will never really know what it feels like to be on the receiving end of, you know, continued derision and division and bullying and all of that stuff that, you know, we
You're
didn't have
offending
to witness.
me. You're
I don't
offending
even
me.
think, I don't know. I mean, you're probably around the same age as I am, but there wasn't a thing called bullying when I was growing up. It was just kind of like if kids called you funny names, the teacher would just kind of chuckle in the foreground, not even in the background. He might get into a little bit of that slandering himself. You know, it kind of
They
makes you
join
feel
in.
good to put other people down.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
had teachers who threw desks across the room.
there you
You
are.
know,
You
my
know,
children are like, what the hell is that?
I remember, I remember being sort of taken to school and like, you know, my father was fairly mild, but I remember, you know, other people's parents, and you know, the father was kind of saying to the teacher, look, if he's misbehaving, give him a good one, you know. And the teacher would hesitate. That would be like a slaughterhouse in there. And I was like really taken aback with the amount of violence that was happening. Even back then, I found that quite frightening. And I don't know whether I was behaving because out of fear or just common sense, you know. But I just found all of that was just a tradition. Yeah. Picking on one another was a blood sport that was best done by conspiracy and by co, you know, cohorting, you know, sort of ganging up.
Still happening though now. I'm seeing it now a lot.
It's happening, but I don't know that it's happening in as much of an acceptable way. Even there's kind of the cancel culture, which is the other extreme of that. Like it's like, you know, picking on people for picking on people, if you know what I mean. You know, because you said something
Shooting
that was,
beer just because you're angry at an advert.
sorry, what was that about beer?
Shooting cases of beer because you're angry at the advert.
No,
Yeah.
I've never heard of that one.
Oh, that's a new one. Yeah.
That doesn't sound like a bad sport. Wherever
No.
there's beer involved, right?
And you from
Anyway,
the drinks industry. But it just seems like the anger could be more directed into something more creative. I know I'm
yeah,
coming back to that again.
anger is really an expressed version of you know, being motivated uh, to to show up, you know. Uh,
Mm.
and it's probably more, you know, a reaction to repressing that motivation to show up. Yeah, because that's what happens if you can't show up, if you are not allowed to express how competent or competitive your spirit is, you start to really repress that. Yeah. And if you repress that thing that becomes anger, then when it does get triggered, it does show up as very ugly, rash, even violent forms. And you're seeing particularly with men, because men have a lot more of that Mars energy. Yeah. Mars is our little warrior, isn't it? The one that kind of makes sure that we're still in the game. Yeah. We all have that primordial survival instinct inside of us. We all have a way of expressing that. It's not the same in everybody, and it's certainly not expressed in the same way. But if you, whether you express it or you repress it, it's still it's still a remnant of the old dinosaur survival instinct. Yeah.
It's funny as we talk about this. I have three girls, 15, 13, and 22 years old. And they were all at the table. I also have a boy who's 19, but he wasn't there at the time. And my 15-year-old slams her fist on the table and says, "Where are the manly men? Bring back manly men." I'm looking at her and I'm going, "Oh, so you've noticed what's going on." It's really interesting. I think
I think it's a phenomenon that's happening at the moment. And particularly with the young, I won't just say the males. I don't think it's. I mean, this masculine, this divine masculine that we all have inside of us is that get up and go that I'm talking about. That thing that's going to get you out of bed every morning and get you in the race. Yeah. If we're starting to, whether by default, really not have jobs to go to, not have a purpose to attend to, not have a fight to fight, not have a battle to wage. We're basically creating this very across the board this tribe of humans that are basically particularly masculine repressed. Yeah. And yeah, of course we're going to have issues with gender identification. And particularly since, in a lot of ways, the feminine has also got that drive to want to, get up and make sure that it's providing food and shelter for its family. And you're seeing, that there's been that transition. But I think it's probably with the men, because men are, biologically geared to fight. Yeah. They're biologically geared to compete with one another, to claim the watering hole, claim it's all a race of passing on your genes, isn't it? The male is always going to find the most suitable female, and which one's that? That's the one that appears to be the most abundant in terms of, I don't know, milk. Whatever it is, okay, it's biological. It's not a logical process, and it sort of changes from culture to culture. Yeah. And women are the same. I think women are always looking to men to say, okay, who's going to be the breadwinner? Who's going to be the one at the front line? I want him, because he's the one who's going to
keep me safe when
keep the
bad
family
guys
together,
come in.
right?
Yeah.
So these are instinctive things. You can't really, once you start intellectualizing them, then you really start into all sorts of political issues. But
so how does that map to you'll own nothing and be happy if there's nothing to fight for as a man?
I get up and fight every day. I'm not talking about fighting in terms of, competing in an enterprise, in a web of, it's like an organized economy. We are shifting, and we're seeing this more and more, I suppose, from 2012 on. Yeah, a massive transition happened where individuals could effectively leave the mainstream economy chain, and by virtue of creating their own content and circulating it on their own terms in their own networks, have been able to create alternative economies. Yeah, a lot of it's happening on the digital scale at this point. But what we're seeing, and I suppose this is kind of part of the phenomenon of the crypto thing as well, but largely, the commercial world has gone from a physical commodity to a much more digital commodity. And if you could somehow bring your wares or ply your trade into the digital stream, then it was pretty likely that you were going to be able to prosper without having to be part of the chain, the old chain. Yeah. So that's been a big transition. It kind of happened very subtly, and it kind of happened in a way where the people running the old shop, the old organization, didn't realize until just 20 minutes before the pandemic. Yeah. And then they thought, hey, we've got to get into some of this action, right? And started to commodify everything. And then you had to really you either had to communicate through Zoom, or you had to show up to work through similar channels. Money wasn't money anymore. It had to be digitized. People weren't accepting paper. There was all kinds of reasons around that. And a number of other things, like you basically didn't have to go anywhere to fill out a form. It was all done online, and you didn't have to wait.
Pants to read the news.
Right. So yeah, we converted, but in that also, then the government started to regulate, that world started to. And I think we're really kind of still got a couple more years to go before that happens. But we're transitioning to that. So how does that kind of you'll own nothing and be happy? Well, I think probably what I'm experiencing from firsthand, and I think a lot of people that I'm seeing that are actually making that work is by keeping your own personal effects very limited. Having a currency, which is a kind of like a stream of income somehow, yeah. But that stream of income it's very close to home in terms of where you're pooling or you're sourcing the generative flow of it. Yeah. If you're a creator, you have to be a creator. You have to be either the creator or very close to the creator and part of the creative process. Yeah. And the creative process becomes a lot more local. It doesn't become sort of something that you go to a corporation or you're outsourcing to various different components.
If we look at communities on the ground then and healers,
yes,
seeing people one-to-one, and they're the artist, they're the creator, they're just creating that space for the healing, or you've got the farmer and you go directly into them. This is what you're meaning, and that we're
that's
making
what I'm talking about. If you make great marmalade, yeah, it's much easier to make 20 jars and put it online somewhere and sell it to people that need that marmalade. That maybe it's just got that little something special. It's got that one slight edge over the other marmalade people, right? And then you give it to half a dozen people, and then they give it, they spread the word, and it says
No pun
basically
intended.
down the bottom, go to this website if you want to order some of this stuff.
Yeah.
And the distribution, so you can see how we're going to transition into a much more local, homemade type of economy. Where everybody, it doesn't matter whether you're making marmalade or you're creating pop songs.
That's really interesting, because I'm following an Irish company and they're making deodorant. And he's literally sharing emails every week. This is me in the kitchen making it, and now I've hired my mother to help me with the marketing. And
people love that stuff.
It's fantastic.
It becomes heartwarming to see somebody not only give you the product, but be part of the relationship you're having, and then and the community isn't necessarily sort of all down at the village green. They're spread all over the world. Like you have a tribe, I have a tribe. What is this tribe? I don't really have firsthand attachment to that tribe, but they're connected to me through my product, whatever that product is, right? They love that product. I don't have to share anything else. I can, if it's part of the product, to sell my image or sell my background, or, you know, my process is how I make that marmalade, right? Yeah, sure. You know, put it out there. But, you know, I can interact with a network which is, you know, commercial and part of my world. I still have my private life. Can still keep my boundaries. Not necessarily, you know, I used to do all sorts of things, but, you know, when I did astrology readings in the office, I kind of felt, okay, you know, I got Mary at 2, so at 1 o'clock, if I didn't have a client before that, I'd have to prepare, you know, I'd have to zhuzh up the place, you know, disinfect, straighten the flowers out, whatever. That was an entire hour, you know, and then Mary would come along, and she'd always, like, people don't come and see an astrologer when they're fine. They've always got an issue, you know, and she'd kind of, like, you know, tell me her problems, and we'd work through those things. And of course, you know, she'd go, but then I'd feel that gunk, you know, that everyone has invariably, whether they've got problems or they're just coming for a visit. They're going to leave their psychic gunk behind. And that in itself, if you're not really trained to understand that needs some sort of, you know, some sort of ritual to decontaminate, that can stick around. So, you know, and I picked this up at somewhere around 2014, 2015. I went, you know, it was Skype back then. I decided, okay, we're doing only Skype from this point on. And it became easier because I didn't really have to do that hour beforehand. I just show up with, you know, I'm not wearing pants right now, okay? But it was as simple as that. It was just kind of like, come from the bedroom to the thing, right? Make sure your eyes are bleary, and your eyebrows are all perked up, and you're ready
Perfect
to
mustache.
go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny you say that, because I've done that too before the pandemic. I made the decision to not see people in my room, and I downsized my office. It's like a little back room in another apartment building, but it's outside of my house because I have to get the hell away from the kids in order to clear my head so I can think to do stuff. But I had a couple of my old longtime clients come and see me in this room, and the room wasn't big enough energetically. The space was just too much. So yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, we change. We people seek us out. I see us not feeling like we need to be in competition with anybody else either, when we live in a world now where we are allowed to be completely ourselves. Then
What are you
that's what we
competing
attract
with?
in.
When you're you and you're uniquely you, and the product or service that you're putting out there is unique, you're not competing with anyone. You're just putting your best self out there. And you're going to have better days and you're going to have crappy days, but you're still doing your best in terms of your own personal best,
I think
right?
so. I think that's important for people who are watching this, especially, you know, if you think I just graduated from a class of 300 new herbalists, and why are they going to come to me? What have I got to offer? But it's very much about being secure in who you are and grounded in yourself, to say, I am the frequency of me, and the people that need me will come to me, and to just have that certainty, because there's plenty of people out there who need help.
Oh, you're kidding me, aren't you? I mean, we're dealing with a planet of 8 billion people, right? We did not have that luxury ever before. So it's not like there's a shortage and you have to headbutt for position, right? Up the front. There's none of that. All you got to do is acknowledge that you're a herbalist. Yeah, herbalism is my business, right? If you're not a herbalist and you're kind of going for herbalism because you think, oh, that's gonna have some, surely it's gonna have some career opportunities, you're an idiot. Right? You're an absolute, and it's just the same
You
sort of
should
thing as
really get your
working.
astrology done so you can see where your strengths are, and what lights you up.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of people out there that don't think that way. So I've got a friend, and I'm trying to get him to get his done by someone that I think is good, because, you know, it's me wanting to bring people on. But if we're moving into this paradigm now, we need to know our strengths and weaknesses. We need to understand and come from a place where it's not because mom told me to do it, or the family's always had this, in this business in the family, but it's like, no, okay, well, maybe something that doesn't exist yet. Like my children, I'm looking at my children and saying, well, maybe my youngest is going to be doing something that doesn't exist yet. And if I start telling her what she should be doing, then I'm taking that opportunity away from the whole world.
Exactly. Yeah. So there's that. We've in the past you only had five options. Yeah. You're either a doctor, you're a lawyer, you're kind of a mechanic, you're a farmer, or you're a loser.
Or a priest.
Well, yeah, whatever, loser.
Loser.
Okay. That's kind of like in the artsy fartsy department. You're never going to make any money doing that, son. But you might be happy. Kind of like the losers were the winners for me. Like they're the ones. They're like always kind of hanging
Black
out with
sheep.
that were
Yeah.
just never going to make much of themselves. And now look at me, right? But the thing is that when it's all defined by that exterior narrative, it does make it very limiting. And what we're discovering now and actually celebrating, even within our family, is that the diversity and the nuance and depth of exploring humans, not for what they can do or they can do for us, but just how authentic they can be. That is what I love about my children, is how I'm just amazed at how original they are, that they don't veer into cliches and stereotypes, that they are actually rather confident enough to be inventive and just funny,
I want to
and
show this. I know
heartwarming.
this. Where's my phone? I'm using my phone. We got a coffee machine and we put in beans. And so I'm like, we need a little blackboard to say what beans are in the coffee machine. So I got these beans that are roasted in Ireland by the Rooster is the brand. And they put the rooster up and it says, drink my juice. And that's the kids being funny.
I
Rooster
love it.
juice.
See? Wow.
I can
Uh,
show you after. I'll put it in the thing at the
yeah,
end.
I mean, that's really what it's all about. And I think, like, what are we going to be doing, into the future when we don't have jobs? Well, we're going to be home. We're going to be out. We're going to be out and about, just playing with our kids and really enjoying them. Like, we're sort of enjoying them now. But if you compare that to how much our poor parents enjoyed us, where they would spend,
No, yeah.
maybe they'd be
Yes,
working
that
over
song,
the
isn't
8
it? I'm retired now. I can spend some time with my kids. And it's like, yeah, but I'm working now, Dad. I don't have
hours.
any time to spend with you.
Yeah, yeah. You're not going to just suddenly retire and shift into a happy paradigm. By the time that you're 65 or 70 or 75, you've already had your guts kicked out of you in terms of what will make you happy and won't. And you can't get happier than what your baseline is. Yeah. If you're used to suffering, you're going to be a grumpy old fart. And you're going to impose that grumpiness upon everyone, and you're going to be resentful of people having more joy or more fun than you. In fact, you're probably never going to be able to sit still, even though you're retired. You may be well off. Your nest egg may be overflowing, but you're still not going to be enjoying that stuff because you just can't. You can't bring yourself. You don't know the difference, and you feel very uncomfortable. So the thing is, as human civilization becomes the burden on us, particularly on a day-to-day level, to perform back-breaking, repetitive, zone out kind of, jobs, it gets filtered out, that we start to lift our capacity to be more creative. And especially if we've enjoyed a life of being creative. Yeah.
We don't have to
Yeah.
carry anybody else's pain anymore. And we can let the children take responsibility for themselves and choose for themselves. It's like I said to my daughter, she's doing fine art and photography. So I said, how do you feel about AI now generating all of these paintings and pictures and the NFTs? So she says to me, this has happened before. How did you feel when you were a portrait artist and then suddenly somebody invented photography? That the value system changed and that how people saw things changed and that there's going to be new openings for new things. And I thought, that's brilliant. because I wouldn't have thought
Well, it
that
is.
way.
Yeah, because all the technology is basically just an extension or a tool, right? And if it's a great tool, we're going to keep working with it or improving the tool. And if it just becomes a little trite, what is AI art stuff? It's fantastic when it first comes out, but then people get sick of it because they realize, hey, that's not really.
It has
You
an
can
extra
spot
finger.
you can spot the difference between something that was generated by pushing a button and something that was generated because someone put a little creativity into it, right? We're not at that stage with machines yet, or artificial intelligence. The artificial intelligence is still at the dumbest level, meaning it just will recreate something that's already been programmed into it. It hasn't got it might have intelligence, but it hasn't got evolved into consciousness, right? As a
Yeah.
consciousness it's been able to go a little bit deeper and generate something that is it's so nuanced we cannot even begin to describe it, let alone program that into a machine. And because we're so far away from that, I think we're pretty safe. But in terms of using even Chat GPT, I think it won't be long before the current version of that a wonderful tool that it's become, particularly like I use it for research all the time. It won't be long before that becomes in itself either boring or transparently, dumb. Yeah, because
Mm.
humans aren't dumb. They can pick up the fact, oh shit, that's not yours. You basically said, write me an essay on, a Midsummer Night's Dream or whatever thing it is, right? You can tell the difference. You can spot the difference. And if you're an academic or you're, someone who's kind of got a bit of wisdom in any subject, you can tell that this is not new ideas. And you can also tell that the person you're dealing with it did not generate the research themselves, yeah, or
Yeah.
didn't really study, or doesn't know what they're talking about. It doesn't take long.
But it's a really good opportunity for education to reinvent itself as well, because I don't think at
Yes,
the moment it doesn't serve. I mean, all the
yes,
things I learned at school that I don't need when we
never
could be
really.
doing more practical education would be great. So,
Yeah, yeah, no, I think the education system has never really been helpful. Never, you know.
mm,
Originally, I think schools, like mass education, was created to feed the industrial age, to prepare us to go into industry. Yeah, which was a great thing because yeah, we needed more industry. We needed to create more things. We needed to push forward, like we have. We've suffered We've suffered for 2,000 years.
yeah,
We've become very industrious as a species, but it's come to the point now where we're amassing all the knowledge into a place where it's central and accessible to everyone on an equilateral level. So
yes,
whether you've got, high education or no education, you can still push a button and get the same product. So if that's the case, then, and we're really only interested in that product, then it's a question of really what you're going to do with that product from there forward, right?
yes,
How are you going to use it to kind of, um, you know, uh, show a little bit of affection, do a little bit of grooming, make a delicious meal or create a better, happier, safer, healthier day for you and the people around you. That's the idea. And the more authentic and ingenious and unique you can be with that, the more value you're going to have in the echelon of society or your neck of the woods, wherever it is you're residing. I don't even know, to be honest, what degree of interface we're going to be having as humans in
yeah,
terms, are we going to need to be in the same room together? Are we going to prefer to be in our own little quasi apartments and have this kind of thing? You're in Ireland. I'm in Greece. Yesterday I was in Thailand, and I've got all these people that are connecting to me, and I haven't been stable since, well, ever really. I left Australia
you've been
in
traveling.
January
Yeah,
2020. 2022, right? So, for the last 15 months, I have a family and, extended friends and whole tribe of people. I haven't lost that connection. I'm still the same guy. And I never really heard anybody say, I miss you. We do probably miss those things like our children, our lovers, our pets, those things we need to have in the room with us.
Mm.
But even those, we're developing some healthy balance in terms of how enmeshed my energy ball with their energy ball becomes mixed, because it's like we're discovering that some degree of definition and space between us actually is very good for our creativity and our developing that uniqueness that I keep talking about.
I agree. Yeah, I saw one of those
So
pictures of having the dog sleeping in the bed is good for you. And I'm like, no, no.
yeah, that's kind of it. Look, I mean, we all come from some form of damaged attachment bond with a parent or the community. Like, so we've got different ways of different coping mechanisms, if you like, but developing codependent relationships, developing, unhealthy attachment habits and addictions, that some of them are very destructive, is not a coping mechanism for life. Yeah. Codependency needs to be looked at. And some of these insecure attachment styles that we have also are little red flags. Maybe it's up to the next generation to start looking at these things, because kids might like their iPads or their PlayStations. They might, if you don't interrupt them, play for days on end without it. But they do get to a place where they crave human contact eventually. Yeah. And so that's important. And not just human contact with anyone. It has to be the source. Generally, kids like to go back to the family unit for some reason, right? Go figure. But it's a matter of meeting out the balance of
So we've got that pendulum
helping.
swing coming in again. It's fascinating times. And I have to say, Ang, of all the conversations that I've had, I would say in the last 6 to 8 months or even a year, this has been the most positive one.
Don't say that.
Well, it is. I'm almost excited now.
Now you'll get nobody. Look, I really love chatting with you, and this is, I mean, I don't do this, okay?
I know. I'm very
just to
honored
keep this
that
to
you said
myself.
yes to
But
me.
I really love your company. I just love you, so
Oh,
I'm
now
really.
everybody knows now.
No, I mean, like in terms of doing these
Well,
collaborative
I
things.
think that that's another thing that's happening now more that we might not have had a chance for. Like if we didn't have these facilities, we would never have met. We'd never have conversations and sparking off creativity off of each other with interesting people and bringing, that's another thing about collaborations, the opportunity to collaborate with other people of similar frequency to
Yeah,
create even more things. I think it's exciting to where we could go. And when
I
I look
always
at my
feel it.
kids and the way that they're thinking and they're not held back, and the things that I worry about for them on their behalf, when I go to them with it, it's like, Mom, what the hell? That's nothing. Help me with this instead. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's it. I think we were all smart enough to know what feels good. Yeah. And when you spend half an hour with somebody and you just walk away thinking, oh God, that was, you're not actually probably not even conscious of the fact that, that was really draining. It was really hard work for me. It just didn't feel easy. When I'm in these relationships with people, I really don't want to work that hard, and because in a lot of ways, when you're forced to come out of your authentic self, either you're in the wrong business or you're doing the wrong job, or you're in the wrong relation. It just doesn't feel easy. It feels like you're pushing it uphill. When you can have when you can be in relationships that are harmonious and well balanced. Sure, you might argue, but I think even the arguing is actually, it feels good. It feels invigorating. It's like when
It
I
can make
play
it clear
tennis.
the air and
You know what I mean?
get that out.
Yeah, it's invigorating, right? But there are some relationships, there are some places, there are some people and some things that are just deflating, depleting, depressing. We ought to know. We ought to really be aware of what those things are and sort of wean or stray away from them gently. We
Well,
don't
I
need.
mean, what I'm really feeling is that time is the most precious thing we have now. To have that appreciation of where you're spending your time, who you're spending your time with,
Yeah,
how you're spending your time. And what's beautiful about that is that the so-called elites have the same amount of time as we have. Time is, so you can't give somebody more time. Okay, maybe they have some magic pill to make them, immortal. That's another conversation for another day. At the end of the day, there's, what was it? I posted a picture up on Facebook and someone said, I love that picture. And I'm like, which picture? I said, I posted that 2 weeks ago. And he's like, no, it was only 2 days ago. And I'm like, okay, that's how much stuff I've got done in the last 2 days.
yeah, right, right. Yeah. If it shows you're enjoying your time. But
Enjoying your
time, when
time.
you say time, I don't look at time like, oh, I've got to rush this because I've got other stuff going on. There's
No,
only this moment, right? There's only
yeah.
the present moment. So if in the present moment you're feeling that this is it's just too much hard work, or it just goes against my capacity to be natural with this thing, then yeah, I mean, there's obviously times where you have to just like endure some sort of frustration or delay, sure, um, but we're getting better at ameliorating those frustrations.
What do
It's
you mean?
not like it used to be. Before COVID, you had to wait in long lines, you had to
Yes.
get there, you had to fill out forms and all this stuff. And people complain about the whole automation process. And we're only really complaining about automation because we don't know where that data is going. But let me tell you, whoever's mining the data and collecting and trying to product place and their time is running out as well. The new AI systems will supersede this kind of greed and centralization. Yeah. And that's going to be a bit of a war coming up now. Yeah. From well, pretty much we've got a solar eclipse coming up next week. I talk about that on the Cosmic Bus. We talk about how it is in square to Pluto. It is really the man versus machine, or David and Goliath kind of thing, right? But we are really awakening to the fact that there's not really that much we're going to put up with anymore, and we don't have to go out there anymore to do anything, particularly protest en masse. We can just protest at home and by
Well,
just
that's
not
good.
switching on, right? That's the big protest,
And
all right?
switching off stuff.
Switching off, unsubscribing, not,
Get rid of the television.
well, yeah, I mean, didn't we get rid of the television back 20 years ago? Have
Oh,
we already moved on to on-demand sort of stuff? I think
yeah,
television,
it's just my
television,
ongoing argument with the Irish Broadcasting Company, and I've published quite a lot of letters about it. And my solution was to officially let them know that I no longer have a television, therefore I'm not paying for a TV license where they can broadcast their propaganda into the house.
I can't believe you guys are still paying licenses for
Yeah, well, I
something.
think I think a huge number of people have stopped. And people are doing things like what you're saying, not realizing that they have a choice because it's just the thing we used to do.
Yeah, so that's the thing, is people who realize they have a choice, and that is the first and foremost sort of initiative of being a sovereign being. Yeah, so you
Yes.
have choices. You've got, this is what COVID taught us. Remember, no, thank you. I don't want this. Step back. You're in my space. I don't want, your attention. I don't need your love. I don't need your product. I don't need to vote for you. I don't need to participate or subscribe to you, racket, whatever that is. Thank you. No, thank you. Right. And sometimes I'll even put the mask on just to make sure that I'm not exhibiting any signs of emotion. you know
That's
it
what
was a
most of the
blessing in
problems the,
disguise.
the guys have taken their masks off right moment because they just sit there and say "fuck you" under the mask all day, and then they're afraid now if they take the mask away, you're going to see them doing it.
I must say I was a little bit difficult with masks and all that stuff.
Oh yeah, but I think we can have a different conversation. We're coming
Yeah.
up to time anyway with this. I'm just wondering if there's anything you'd like to leave us with astrologically that you feel is important that's coming up.
No, not really. I think the only thing I want to leave people with, if I'm going to leave on anything, is just be present. You, astrology aside, history aside, science and religion and all of that aside, if you are in this space, in this present space, you have the power to make choices. And there's a lot of them if you come to this space. So, just coming to the space is hard enough. Stopping, all the worries of the past and all the anxieties of the future and being in present mode is hard work. But it's not that hard. All you got to do is, master the technique of just taking a breath and being in this present moment. From that space, anything is possible because you got choices. And if you can make a choice, if you can make a decision and follow it through with appropriate action, you'll get a result. It may not be the result that you envision, but it'll be a result, which is the start. If you can get results, then you're on the way to being a creative being. If you want to come and find out more about your astrology or, continue the discussion, you can join the Cosmic Bus. But I'm not
Yeah, I
here
was
to
just going to say, if you enjoyed watching Ang and you want to catch him for longer on his own when he goes into his stream of consciousness. And honestly, Ang, when I watch you, I can see the genius pouring through you when you get into that zone. And what I love about Cosmic Bus is that it doesn't necessarily happen at the same time on the same day every week, because if you do that, you're not connecting into that stream. Whereas you know when the time is right and you know when it's ready to go. And then there's always the replay then for your subscribers to sit and watch. And it's thick with information to the point where I would replay bits over and over again. And I get a pull sometimes to just watch a certain episode and I'm like, that's what I needed to hear. And then I can turn it off and not watch the whole thing. But just
yeah,
it's
yeah.
something in it for everyone. I really highly recommend it. And I'm going to put the links there as to how you find Ang below. So
Yeah, it's great to join, and it's great to have people, whoever you're watching. It's great to connect that way. I am aware that particularly when I come onto these things that it's got the energy of connecting. Yeah, so in that sense, although I come largely unprepared and unscripted, as you know. I am also aware that I'm speaking throughout time, yeah, and reaching people that wouldn't have been able to reach before. This is the beauty of where we're at. Yeah. This is the it's we're living in a glorious age, and it's only going to get better. Yeah, despite of what the naysayers and all the different graffiti on the wall is saying, it's only we're heading into a beautiful time for not just the humanity but the soul of our eternal existence. We're going to liberate ourselves completely. If you want to know more, then
click all the links.
just join the narrative, join the discussion, and it's nice to see you, Abby, and it's a pleasure to have you on board the Cosmic Buzz. It's been a pleasure to be part of your little.
And thank you very much for coming on my podcast, my little podcast. And I hope I'll see you
Well, I
again.
don't even know what you're doing. I have no idea who your audience is.
Well, let me press stop and then we can chat a little bit
All
longer.
right.
Okay.
But it's been an honor and a pleasure. Yeah. Mm.